welcome Michael Leahy and Patty Honorado. 7 years ago, you had the picture-perfect marriage, or so it would seem, the wrinkle-free life, the big house, nice income, 2 kids, handsome husband, beautiful wife, things are great. Very involved in your church. In fact, your pastor told me, you guys did some sort of seminar or spoke, or, it was easy to lift you up as, here's what you need to become. But 7 years ago, you had a conversation, Patty, with a friend who said something really interesting to you. Tell us about that. Okay.
A group of friends of mine took me out for the evening, and as we were out, one of the girls had dealt with her husband having an affair, and she looked at me and she said, "Patty, let me tell you that if you tell me your husband's schedule, I can tell you whether he's having an affair or not." And I thought, well, that was strange. I'm not really sure why she told me that, or where we're going with that. But I kept pondering it, and so I left that night and I went home, and nothing was showing that I should be worried about this topic. But as I told you, the night was just really dark, and it kept weighing on my mind. So I walked inside and I explained to Michael what the night was like, and I looked at him, and out of the blue, I know it was with God's prompting, I looked at him and I said, "Are you having an affair?" And he said, "Yes."
Now, why in the world would you admit to such a thing?
He didn't hesitate
at the time,
either.
Yeah, at the time it was really out of arrogance. I knew that I was in an affair, and it was almost like I was kind of ready to take that next step, whatever that next step was. But I was, it wasn't a matter of repentance, I can assure you that.
And how did you feel?
I was devastated. I've never had anything put me on my knees like finding out that my husband had cheated on me and had betrayed me, when commitment and family, we never even talked about divorce. That was just something that was never allowed to even be discussed in our home.
And then as the discussion went on and as time went by, you discovered it was more than just an affair with a woman.
Right. A couple of months after finding out that he, was in an affair and promising to quit and going back and forth and on that roller coaster, he took me for a walk down at Powers Ferry, and he said, "I need to tell you that I have another secret that's been in my life for a long time." And I said, "Well, bring it on. It can't get any worse than it already is right now." And so he looked at me, he said, "I want you to know that I'm addicted to pornography."
And you thought?
And I was like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I didn't know anybody. I didn't even know, what did that mean? What did that entail? Is it movies? Is it pictures? Is it something we can get through or whatever? So an affair, sitting on top of the information that your husband is involved with pornography, was like a double whammy in how it made me feel about myself.
But you didn't give up.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. When I found out he was having an affair, having 2 children, and my background of commitment, and that I'm very much a fighter, and I thought there's no woman's going to come in and take over what we had developed over 13 years. Absolutely not. We had a 10-year-old and a 2-year-old, almost 2-year-old, and I wasn't going to lay that down, and if there was a throwdown, I was winning, okay, because there was absolutely no way I was going to let some woman come in because she was selfish and because he was selfish and was into pornography to take over what I had helped to build all those years.
So how did you fight it?
Oh, Lord, I don't know if you want to know.
Well, in some ways you tried to compete, right?
Oh, yeah. How did I? Okay, yeah. Absolutely. When he would describe to me like a lot of details in how she looked, and what she wore and how she wore her jewelry and what kind of fine suits she wore and what kind of car she drove. And I was a teacher, and I couldn't compete with all that and that kind of money. And and that's what I thought I was supposed to do. And so I did. I thought I got to get it better. I got to get it bigger. I've got to go get the new clothes, and I did. I went out and tried to buy suits that I couldn't afford because I wanted to project this picture that she had to him so he would be more interested in me.
But she was really trying to compete with something that didn't even really exist, wasn't she? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Eventually, your marriage ended in divorce. You were divorced.
Yes.
But Michael, you told me earlier that you knew on your wedding night that Patty wasn't going to be enough for you in the area of intimacy. How did you know that?
Well, ever since I was 11 years old and was exposed to pornography for the first time on a middle school playground, I started to develop a relationship with pornography and with everything that went along with it, the beliefs that women, their value was based on their body shape and size, that women wanted to have sex, they wanted to have sex all the time, they were there to serve you as a man. And so as I progressed through high school and college and up to the years before I met Patty, it reflected in my dating relationship and my attitude and the way that I treated women. I mean, I was a fun guy to be with, fun guy to date, was very successful on the surface, was a college football player, student body president, was recruited by IBM coming out of college. So, I mean, I was living the life and I was enjoying myself, but I was totally focused on self. And I looked at women as something that was there for my pleasure, as opposed to respecting them as individuals.
So why get married?
Well, I mean, deep down in my heart, like anyone, I think I really desired to be loved and for who I was and appreciated, and I wanted to be known. But, by then I'd built up a secret. See, I never told anyone that I looked at pornography. It was a secret that I would hold for 30 years. And never told anyone. Now, when I was in college, the other guys had magazines around too, so when you were around that peer group, you'd look at the material. But when I was, in the business world, and certainly when I was married, I kept that as a secret. So when I met Patty, I was just blown away. She was incredible, a godly woman, a beautiful woman, wonderful family. We fell in love, we dated, and I asked her to marry me, and we had what looked like what was going to be the storybook marriage.
But surely you weren't planning to carry this secret life of pornography with you into marriage, or what was your thinking about that?
Well, I certainly wasn't planning on letting her know about it. I think really it was more that I felt like I could manage it. This was something that I had controlled. It was growing in my life. I knew that. It was taking a bigger and bigger part of me, but I was still successful. I was still meeting, my obligations and my needs and my desires and all the material things in my life, even though I was kind of blocking that part of my life and my soul away from people. So no one was really getting to know me.
Right.
And I thought, well, I can marry Patty, and she doesn't need to know this stuff. She wouldn't want to know it, for one thing, but we'll just, this will go away eventually, because now I've met the woman of my dreams, and obviously she's going to be enough.
So the needs that were met through pornography, you just assume once I'm married, there's a real live person in my life,
yes,
one will replace the other. But that didn't happen.
No.
In fact, you said even on your wedding night, you knew.
No.
I mean, on my wedding night, it was kind of the first time where I really realized, walking around in the hotel where we had our, wedding night, that I was still looking at women, still objectifying women, looking at them for their body shape, and this was my wedding day, my wedding night, and over time it became clearer and clearer to me, even especially the first year or two of marriage and the adjustment, that I started thinking, I'm going to be with one person now for the rest of my life, physically. And because that was something that I'd made a priority in my life, I'd twisted it around, and I wasn't even looking at, from the perspective of us having really a soul-level relationship and true intimacy and all. For me, love equaled sex, and this was one partner versus thousands that I had fantasized in my mind through pornography over the years.
So, and I think one of the takeaways of your story is there's a tendency for men to think that I can compartmentalize. It's like, this is my private life, this is my secret life, this is what I do, and I can be here and then I can function successfully here. But once you got married, this private life spilled over into your marriage and manifested itself in your intimacy with Michael, didn't it?
Absolutely. And I think one of the false things about what a lot of people would think is, because he was so into pornography, you would think, well, wow, they probably had this unbelievable sex life because he saw all this stuff and wanted to act out all these things. But it's actually opposite, because he was having multiple affairs before a live affair actually happened. He was having, multiple affairs like that. And we were actually not having sex. Even online, with the girlfriend that he had from high school. And so, there were a lot of other little things that were
the intimacy in your marriage almost evaporated.
It was. And then especially when we had children, and I told you earlier, the first kind of inkling that something might be there was when I found the Playboy magazine 2 years after we were married, in his briefcase, and he said it was someone else's, and I believed him because, I'm supposed to. I was a newly married woman, and I was supposed to trust him. He was supposed to take care of me. That was his job. So as far as the sex life was concerned, there wasn't much of one because he was getting his needs met, but he didn't care about what I needed or wanted because it's so self-absorbing in any addiction.
So, and again, this is a big wake-up call for so many people because this addiction that began as an 11-year-old just out of curiosity, boys will be boys, blah, 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 that you thought, well, I can keep this category, in a compartment. It actually was the very thing that sabotaged the most important relationship to you in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it wasn't like I woke up one day and was addicted. I fed this over time, and as I fed my appetite for the material, which was meeting a need, not in the way that I believe God designed me now looking at it, but at the time I looked around and I saw my friends doing the same thing, and it was just kind of the way that we did stuff, that grew and grew over time to play a bigger and bigger role in my life. So about 13 years into our marriage, this had progressed for me into the stage of the internet. I was in the technology industry, so I was actually discovered and consumed internet pornography long before most people even knew what the internet was.
Wow.
And that made it even more difficult. Plus I was traveling in business a lot and all. So by the time that chat rooms and reconnecting with an old girlfriend of mine at a 20-year reunion, I was basically an affair waiting to happen. All I had to do was find in the skin what I was looking at on paper, and that's exactly what happened. I met a woman, she was a customer of mine, and she basically epitomized everything that I had been fantasizing all those years of the ideal woman, and it turned out to be anything but that.
Wow. Now, initially, Patty, your emotions, you kind of got mad at yourself. I'm going to compete. I'm going to do better. I'm going to look better. I'm going to, I'm going to keep this thing alive. But eventually, those emotions, that anger that you turned toward yourself, turned toward Michael.
Yes. And I revealed to him this last night, and I never had told him this before. But in dealing with the addiction after several months, the up and down, I'm going to do better. I promise you I'm going to do better. I'll do what I'm supposed to do. And it was just an up and down, and I could see it happening. And I really believed that he was trying to do better, and you could just see that it was like a roller coaster. And one particular night, it was a really, really bad situation that broke out between, catching him and stuff and doing things he was not supposed to be doing. And so I was standing in my kitchen, and I pulled open the knife drawer. And he was standing back behind me by the island. And I remember thinking, all you got to do is grab this knife, and you can stab him right in the back, take him out, and it's going to be no problem. Because I was so devastated and so tired of the roller coaster up and down that I would rather have seen him dead than to have to continue to deal with the hell that he was putting us through. My children, myself, and and I'm beating myself half to death.
Right.
And so thank the Lord, I put my hand on the knife. I had the drawer open, and I knew he wouldn't know. And when you're angry like that, you can do just about anything.
Right.
I understand those crimes of passion. I do. When I hear them on the news, I understand how those people can take themselves there when they never would have any other time.
Right.
And so I put my hand on that knife, and I thought, I'm going to take him. I promise you I am. And God was like, no, you're not. You've got 2 children. No, you're not. This is not the way to handle it.
Is it an exaggeration to say, and either one of you can answer this, that really your marriage was doomed from the beginning?
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah.
It was that strong of the pornography was that strong of a hold on you?
Yeah, the reality was that there were times where, and we've talked a lot about this, so there were times where I really felt like I wanted to get well, that I wanted help. But then there was always the pull back, and the bottom line was, when it came to the end of the day, I really didn't want to give this up. I had basically formed a relationship with something. I had made it into a lesser God because I kept feeding it and it grew. And as I fed it and it grew, it became the most important relationship in my life. So by virtue of the fact that I didn't share that with Patty before we were ever, even when we were engaged, I would say that, I was pretty much dooming our relationship. At some point in time, as long as I wasn't turning the corner and as long as I was continuing to feed that, it was eventually going to erupt into something. I didn't know that at the time.
Right, of course.
Because I kind of saw, if you put it on a scale of 1 to 10, 9 or a 10 being addicted and 1 or a 2 being don't really respond to this, I always saw myself kind of like what I thought a lot of guys were, in like a 4 or 5.
Right.
Kind of in the middle. Like I notice sexual imagery. I notice, certain clothes or a dress or what have you. And I would struggle with it a little bit, but I had it under control. And the scary thing is when you continue to feed that and it grows through this range we call sex syndrome, where it's all around you and you are a 9 or a 10. As an addict, the danger there is you think you're a 4 or a 5.
And then
everyone's telling
right,
you you're a 9
right.
or a 10, but you've convinced yourself that you're still under control. And it really wasn't until a year after my divorce before I finally realized that I really was addicted.
A year after the divorce.
Yeah.
So even with all the, it led to an affair and on and on and on, and you're to the point where, as you told me, you basically said, this is what I want. This isn't just what I struggle with. This is what I want, and still didn't consider yourself an addict.
I had we had the conversation early on, and I shared with her that I was addicted to pornography. And I shared that because a close friend had confronted me about it. And I was in denial. I was like, why are you telling me that you're addicted or sexually addicted? And he said, well, because I think you are. And I, said, you're crazy. And he started to describe some of the behaviors from way back when he was 11, 12, 13 years old.
Wow.
And I was nailed. Oh yeah, and I was like, that was me. And so that's when I confronted Patty with it, and there was always this yo-yo of, I want help, I want to get help, but I really wasn't totally committed. I was going to recovery groups. We were going to counseling.
I was too.
I would lie through my teeth in recovery groups. I would lie through my teeth to counselors, and it really wasn't until, like I say, a year after our divorce, when it really hit me that I had given everything over that I'd worked for my entire life over to this thing, and that I really was addicted and I really needed help, or else I wasn't going to make it.
Go ahead, Patty.
Well, I was thinking about something because you were talking about not knowing whether he was addicted, but I can remember one particular time I had gone to school and he was working out of the house in the basement, which was a great place to be, And so you kind of hiding down there. And so I came home, and I remember it was about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and he came up the stairs. And do you remember you looked at me and you said, I actually worked 1 hour today. And I'm like, yeah, and I put in 8, But in other words, he was so wrapped up with fantasy, okay, because fantasy was strong. And, and I got all those stories.
Right.
Okay? And so he came up and he said, I actually worked 1 hour today. And I thought, that's insane.
But understand
that he could keep
also
his mind
that
only intact for an hour.
In the time alternating from when I was trying to confess and come clean, I was basically making her life a living hell by saying, yeah, you aren't enough, or yeah, you don't meet my needs. That's why we call addiction insanity. It was literally insane in our household.
It was.
And again, the message and the tragedy is this all began as an 11-year-old boy who does what every 11-year-old boy does or is somehow exposed to, and then grew and grew and grew and grew and set up, basically sabotage your most important relationships, and not just with your wife, but with your kids as well, which is heartbreaking. You brought a very compelling visual aid. You want to tell us that story, Patty or Michael?
Yeah, you can tell, and I'll tell you.
Yeah, I had taken a trip for Thanksgiving to my parents' house in Seattle, which is where I grew up out in Washington State. And the Washington State Cougars had made it to the Rose Bowl that year. And whenever I traveled on business trips or on trips, I would usually get my boys, a shirt. And so I got my son a shirt, which was Washington State Cougars go to the Rose Bowl, and sent it to him. And so I remember after coming back home, I asked Patty, I said, I never see Chris wearing this shirt.
He was
an awesome
about 10 years old.
About 10 years old at the time, yeah. And so I just like, whatever happened to the shirt? Why don't I see him wearing it? And then...
Well, and this was, a lot of abuse was going on verbally, not physically, but just verbally, bashing us. Definitely had taken himself away from the children to try to prepare the fact that he was going to be leaving, okay, because the fantasy was more important. And so he sent that shirt, and Chris was in so much turmoil. And he took that shirt upstairs with a pair of scissors, and he started hacking it up and cutting it up. And
If you can.
he was so upset that he had cut the shirt up because he hated what his dad was doing. And there was nothing a 10-year-old little boy could do
Right,
about it.
right.
And he knew we were, I was trying to hold things together, but he couldn't get him to behave. And he hacked it up so badly, but he cried so hard because he felt so guilty that his dad had sent him the shirt and that he was being ugly, so he cut the shirt up because he was so hurt that he just cried for hours until he absolutely was so exhausted from crying he passed out.
Wow.
See,
Yeah,
Christopher
he
and
was-
I had an extremely close bond, and we did everything together. I coached him in every sport. You're a coach now, or you got kids in the sports, and I coached him 3 sports. It was a constant thing. We played in the front yard, and then it was like all of a sudden the door was closed,
Wow.
and the relationship wasn't there. And of course, I was at a place where I didn't understand why he was responding the way he did, because I was so consumed with myself.
Yeah.
Eventually you left, and that sort of led to
Yeah.
the sort of bottoming out.
Yeah, I hit bottom about a year after, and the reason it took so long is because I was still committed to a relationship, this woman that I was having the affair with, which really was, now that I look at it, it was just pornography with skin on. There was nothing true or real or honest about her any more than there was about the material I'd been feeding myself for 30 years. So when I discovered the truth about her, which was kind of like the truth about the false intimacy of pornography, it really hit hard for me because I'd given everything up
Right.
for her and found out that she was also seeing 5 other married guys.
While
at
she
the
was
same
seeing you.
time.
So you were number 6.
Yeah, I was I
He
was
was
that
the
special
6th dog in
number
the pen.
6. Yeah.
The what?
He was the 6th dog in the pen.
The 6th dog in the pen.
I told him there were a bunch of dogs.
Yeah.
But an interesting thing happened. You got to realize that, I mean, this path started for me growing up in a religious home. We went to church every Sunday. I didn't know what it meant to have a personal relationship with Christ until I met Patty, and through her and her walk and her family, I accepted Christ about a year after our marriage. So all this continued to grow as a Christian because I was, putting it into its component place. And I came to this moment where I was discovering the truth about this woman, and God laid a verse of scripture on my heart I'll never forget. It was, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." And I think in my arrogance, I kind of interpreted that to mean, I know the truth about her. She's sleeping around, she's not faithful and all that. And almost like it was vindicating me. And a couple days later, through some circumstances, it really hit home. It was like, no, God was saying that about me. That you will know the truth about your decrepit heart, about your being a liar, about your being a cheat, about who you are apart from me.
Wow.
Because a couple months before that, actually over a year before that, when Patty and I were still married, I very clearly remember having this conversation, one-way conversation with God, where I basically was so sold out to this whole idea of me, myself, and I, that I said, God, I don't care what you have for me and what plans you have laid out for me. I want this woman, this relationship more.
Wow.
And when that happened, it was like God was just taking his hand off my life and saying, okay, if that's your God,
Wow.
have at it.
So you discovered she was basically what you were, unfaithful, and the world, came apart one more time, and that was rock bottom. And then what happened?
I was living all of a sudden as a single guy, middle-aged single guy in Dunwoody in a 2-bedroom apartment. I had suicidal thoughts. I remember just spending days and days and days and months walking the streets of Dunwoody around all the, very industrial office buildings and everything, knowing that I was alone, knowing that I'd given up my wife and marriage of 15 years, my boys, my family, or all of our family relationships. No one wanted to have anything to do
And your
with
job,
me.
right?
And my job, which was a partnership with my brother. And I remember just, walking the streets at night and just coming home and falling on my face and just crying and just crying myself to sleep, essentially, and could not believe what I had done. And there was no one else to really reach out to. But there was a night where I could hear this voice, and it just said, this pain can go away, and all you have to do is get a gun and put it in your mouth and pull the trigger.
Wow.
And you don't ever have to feel this again.
Wow.
And it was like, at the same time, I heard another voice, and it was saying, I can't save you from the pain or the consequence, but I can give you a new life.
Wow.
And so that was my turn.
And about that time, Patty's brother actually called you.
Yeah, about then, by strange coincidence, her brother, who I really didn't have much of a relationship at all, especially, I mean, even when things appeared good, but certainly not now, called me up and just out of the blue. It was very unusual. I think it's the only phone call I ever got from him my entire life. And he just called up and said, Michael, I don't know where you're at or what's going on in your life, but all I can tell you is just seek God, find God, whatever that means to you.
Wow.
And so I actually started going to your father's church because I was pretty much, had severed a lot of relationships in my church. They didn't want to have too much to do with me where I was at. And I just started hanging on God's word at every service and sermon, and over time was invited to North Point by some friends and came here, and it was kind of a point where I was ready to grow. I'd come to the realization that I couldn't do this alone and that I needed help. And it was at North Point where I started to make the relationship connections that was such a key part that as I learned of coming out of this.
You got in a group with some men who had similar pasts and backgrounds and began to talk?
Yeah, we got into a small group, but not your typical North Point small group. This was a small group of guys that struggle with sexual addiction. And it was a very humbling experience, to say the least. I started a process that went on for several years, and it was sharing from my gut things that I'd never told anyone in my entire life, anyone in my family, Patty or anyone. And what was amazing is realizing, A, that so many other people were struggling with the same things, and that, B, that you can't lie to a liar.
Yeah.
And you can't con someone who's been there before. And so they were requiring me to be gut level honest. And so it was really connecting with people that were safe, that would be confidential for me, and starting to establish those relationships where I could then be accountable for trying to get healthy.
And the tragedy, and we talked about this, and I think part of the takeaway is you could have done that 10 years earlier.
Oh, yeah.
You could have done that 5 years earlier.
Yeah.
You could have done that the year before you were married.
When I was a 3 or a 4 on the
right,
scale.
exactly. That thing that led to the breakthrough for you was available. And the tragedy being this thing that was going to remain a secret was exposed in the one relationship that you would want to keep it secret from the most.
Yeah.
Right.
And yet, as we talked about, there's this power, and I want you to talk about this powerful principle of when the thing that is most secret is exposed to light, somehow it loses some of its power.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the whole basis for what we would do in those groups was it was never forced, but it was expected, and you would hear other people share things that they'd never shared before, and then you would see them start to be free of that burden. I mean, they would come and we'd get guys that would walk in, much like me, and I'd been in there months later, and I would see them struggling with this whole issue of maybe it was like, we believe in sexual sobriety means no sex with self or others. Well, that means no masturbation. And these guys are like, what? I couldn't imagine that. Every day or almost every other day for my entire life, kind of a thing. And yet all the rest of us are sitting in that room going, I was there too. And we're able to encourage them and say, I know this is like, you can't even fathom this, but trust me, with God's help and grace and guidance, and with our support, it can happen.
So part of it was exposing secrets to light. And for Christians, this is even more complicated because, as we saw in the video, if you're in Buckhead and you got a couple of beers in you, you'll talk about pornography and I love pornography, it's like, but for Christians, we would never say that. We would just lie because it's compounded. So it's something that people want to keep as a secret. And if you're a Christian, it's going to really be a secret. And as we've talked about, secrecy fuels the power of an addiction.
Well, we had everything to lose. We had a 5,000 square foot house. We had all our relationships. We had this 15-year marriage. I mean, that's the way I was thinking of it. It was like it would have been a lot easier when I was back, in grade school or in high school, just saying, well, I found a Playboy or whatever, than dealing with this.
The stakes were higher, and so we keep it a secret. So you exposed your secret to light, you got some accountability, and then the third thing you did, and I wrote this verse down there, Romans 13:14 says, make no provision for the flesh in regards to its lust,
Yeah.
which basically means don't provide opportunities for the flesh. And so
Yeah.
you made some pretty extreme decisions.
Yeah, I mean, there was a principle that was at work in my life, and it was real simple. It's what you feed grows and what you starve dies. And
Say that one more time.
What you feed grows and what you starve dies.
Wow.
And what I realized is that it wasn't just going to pornography or X-rated websites or what have you, but it was the way that I was looking at women on the street. It was the way that I would oogle, magazine covers walking by the checkout stand in the grocery store. It was the way that I was objectifying women and relationships in total, and things that a lot of people would just kind of blow off and think it's no big deal were a big deal for me, like just certain TV shows on regular cable or having internet access at home was really a struggle too. So I just realized that and it took me a while. I was probably a year and a half in recovery groups before I finally cut the cable on my TV. I literally got some scissors or a knife and cut the cable, both the electrical cord, and cut the cable off. And
So
then I got
you
rid
had
of the
no
internet.
television in your home?
Yeah.
You survived not having a television in your home? Is that possible? You didn't.
It was possible.
You didn't starve, or
No,
you were
still
fine.
here.
And then you took it one step further.
Yeah, and I got rid of the internet.
No internet in your home? No internet or television? Didn't you just become like, yeah. The women are clapping, yeah. But this, again, for the person, if you think of this continuum, innocence to addiction, somewhere in the middle, everybody thinks they are, I struggle, I look, but I'm not an addict. And in your case, in order to get back to some sense of sanity, you had to take extreme measures.
Yeah, there's, one thing that happened over my life was when I made the choices, and this wasn't anything that I'm a victim of. I made the conscious choice, there was the irresponsible choice to go to the material. But at the time, to get to pornography, you would have to make that choice and go find it. Today, I realized in recovery that pornographic material is being pushed to us every day in our music, our media, TV shows, video games, what have you. We're surrounded by it. And so there's this flow, there's this inertia or momentum in our culture that a guy like me who's at a 9 or a 10 trying to get back to the 2, has to swim even harder to go upstream.
You can't do what the average guy does to combat this.
And that's why it sounds like extreme measures, but it sure would have been a lot easier if I'd have made those decisions early on.
And again,
stayed
exactly
at the 2 or the
that, and I
3.
think that's part of the message.
Yeah.
You could have made that decision, as a teenager, a college student, a graduate student, and engaged. At any point, those decisions could have been made.
And one of the interesting things related to that, I go around and talk to college students a lot in my ministry, and I'll never forget, I was at I think it was West Virginia University recently, and I heard a kid walking out after hearing me speak, and he walked up to obviously a friend of his, and he said, I've never heard, no one's ever told me this stuff. No one's ever said that you could get addicted to pornography. No one's ever said that this can take over your life over time. And I think that's the thing that I'm realizing, not only in my own walk, but in talking to others, is that you really do need to make a conscious decision and realize that every day, even if you're making a non-decision, that's a decision to say, I'm going to let the culture continue to fill me and my mind, which we also tell the students is the most powerful sex organ in your body. You fill your mind with the images and the beliefs and the false beliefs of the culture about sexuality, and you are going to grow that into something that will possibly dominate your life, and you lose control to that, like we did.
Patty, what would you say to the women who suspect maybe that their husbands are involved with pornography? And secondly, what would you say to engaged young ladies who suspect or know that their boyfriends are, and their boyfriends say, boys will be boys, it's just a thing, it's not a big deal, or even women who are in relationships that look like they're headed toward marriage?
Okay. If you think your husband is involved in pornography, do not stick your head in the sand and act as if it's not there. That's the worst thing you can do. Don't let it keep growing and continuously getting worse and worse, because it will. It'll escalate out of control. For someone, and also with that person, they need to seek some help, some professional counseling. And also look at their actions, because as much as Michael kept saying, I want to get out, I want to change, I want to do better, every time we went to a counselor, he would lie the whole time. So we were not going, it was like being on a treadmill, we were going nowhere. So those actions need to be shown by that person that there is a true effort to come out and try to, have some recovery there. If I knew I was engaged and I found out that my fiance was into pornography, I would tell him that he either had to hit the highway or get some help, and I would put off the wedding even if the invitations were sent out or whatever, because you're talking about hopefully a lifetime that you're together. You know, and you don't want to have to deal with those problems later on down the road, because they're just going to get worse.
So marriage does not solve the issue of pornography.
No.
It does
And
not.
an actual physical relationship with a woman does not replace years of mental images.
No.
Right.
And pornography does not enhance a couple's sex life, does it?
No, it really
Never.
doesn't. And
Yeah.
it really, yeah, it doesn't.
I mean, if anything, it makes it worse, because now they have someone to compete with that is impossible to compete with.
That's right. You
Right.
can't compete. You mentioned an interesting finding about what happens in the brain with pornography as opposed to an actual sexual experience.
Yeah, you know, one of the things, and this really came out because of the evolution and the growth of the internet. Internet pornography is absolutely the crack cocaine of sexual addiction. And the reason is because it has certain characteristics that, you know, when tied into the way that your brain and the neurochemistry of your brain works, it can become highly addicting. And the other thing is that because there's access to so much material and such a wide variety. I mean, kids with 1 or 2 clicks can get to things that I didn't discover for 20 years.
Right.
And I was kind of out there looking at the material. Well, over time, your body is designed to respond. I mean, God created sex, and He created it for a good reason, but it can also be misused. And so when you expose your body, your brain, to things that are very stimulating, that go beyond what would be considered normal in a marriage relationship, you're going to respond to that. And what is normal sexual relations aren't going to give you that same buzz or that same high, if you will, that something that's really distorted and really twisted does, just because it's different and it's unusual and it's unique, and it's part of that escalation process.
And I think this is the message and the tragedy of this, because the average man who is looking at pornography as a single man is looking forward to a relationship with an actual woman.
Yeah.
And in reality are basically undermining his own potential to enjoy what he's looking forward to.
There was a fellow a college student who actually was a student at I think a Baptist college in the South, who was also part of the 2020 interview that was done. We never met him, but in there, what was amazing is he talked about, as a young, I think he was 22, 23 years old, he talked about how this had just totally disabled his ability to form honest, intimate relationships with other women, and even men, really, on a healthy level. And the interviewer asked him, she said, well, you know, have you had sex before? And he goes, nope.
Nope, I heard
I'm a
that.
virgin.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know,
And
it-
yet
people were
already
blown away
he
by that.
has sabotaged his
Yeah.
ability to experience intimacy.
And he realizes it
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, Patty, here's a question that the women are wondering, I think. Why in the world are you here talking about this? I mean, this is the event in your life that you want to put in the rearview mirror to the point where you can't see it anymore. You live in Savannah now. You've moved. You're remarried. You have a new family, a new identity. And here you are, you know, getting up in front of thousands of people going on 2020, telling your story. Why?
Well, there are a couple of reasons, actually. One is it's very healing to myself, believe it or not. You know, getting up and sharing, having to restore back with Michael, who's a very good man, and he was a wonderful husband for 13 years. I would never say anything bad about him. I get mad with him now and again, but for the most part, you know, he was very good to me. Okay, so it really helps with my own healing, because I know that if I didn't restore my relationship with him, that my children wouldn't restore their relationship, and that really needed to happen big time, because I know as a teacher, and I watch it in high school, when those children don't have good relationships, they act out in class.
Wow.
You know that. And so I know that it's helped me with healing with him, because if I didn't forgive and move ahead, I could not have the wonderful relationship with the husband that I have now, nor would I have a really good relationship with my children. And I would only be hurting everyone around me.
Wow.
You know, including my family.
There's got to be more to it than that.
Yeah,
though.
well, and two, I want to bring about an awareness of the problem. And I do teach high school, and we see it in high school. We catch high school students. So, and I think sometimes the Christian community in particularly wants to pretend like it's not here. It doesn't enter this room, and it does enter this room. And we want to make out, well, let's don't talk about it. And you see people tighten up when you mention it. But the fact of the matter is, it's very, very prevalent even in our Christian community. And we do need to talk about it.
How prevalent do you think it is?
Well, we deal in partnership with Campus Crusade as one of the ministry organizations. Just amongst Christian students, the most conservative number that I've gotten, and this was from the national director of their campus ministry, so he's got 44,000 students and 2,200 staff he's working with. They said that 90% of all men that are involved in their campus ministry struggle on a daily basis with internet pornography.
This is college
90%,
students.
90%,
and these are mostly Christians.
Yes. That's the most conservative number I've gotten.
Wow.
And I'm out there talking to guys out in the field who are campus directors every day, and I've never heard a number lower than that. You know, there are 12 million people in the United States. I'm sorry, there are actually 18 to 22 million people. 10% of our male population is sexually addicted, and an increasing percent of our female population has become sexually addicted. But for every addict, every person who's a 9 or a 10, there are 10 people who are in the middle of that scale of 1 to 10 that we were talking about, that I believe the culture now, because it's become so pornographic, is moving them towards a 10.
Wow.
And that's what we do when we talk to the students, because most of the students, like I'm sure most of the people here would say, well, this isn't me. You know, I'm not an addict, it hasn't gotten to that point or what have you. But the reality is it doesn't need to get to that point to lose a marriage or to have, extreme consequences in your life. And while it costs us a marriage, it didn't have to, and it doesn't have to for anyone else. But I can guarantee you that if this issue goes unaddressed in your relationships, it will cost you something far greater than you can ever imagine.
You just can't compartmentalize this forever.
No.
And it makes the woman feel so badly about herself. You know, she just never feels like she's ever good enough. And a lot of people always ask me, do you struggle? Absolutely. I struggle to this day. I still, things will come up, take me back, in doing this, it does make me go back. I pick up my journal and I start reading and I start seeing how insane I was for a while and fighting. I felt like I was standing there swinging all the time. And I was
and you
going
couldn't
nowhere.
even find the enemy.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
There were two
Right.
enemies. There were two enemies, and I felt like I was just punching and getting nowhere. So it just makes the woman feel so badly about themselves, and they're sitting there working so hard to be the right mom, to be the right neighbor, to be the Christian woman they're supposed to be, to all these hats that we put on in any given day.
Yeah.
And then to have your husband sit down and have to look at another woman, which, by the way, is someone's daughter.
Yeah. There's a thought.
That is someone's daughter that you're looking at.
Michael, Patty's here for a couple of reasons, and you're here because this has actually become a real crusade for you. And you started an organization called BraveHearts Ministries. And you're on college campuses, and you're on a crusade to say to college students, you're sabotaging your own future. This is not a pastime. This is a pathway. It leads somewhere. Tell us a little bit about, you have a unique thing that's sort of an invitation for people to get involved with the college they went to, or how can they get involved with what you're doing?
Well, we started, I went into this full-time area of ministry wanting to help guys who were struggling and who were fully addicted, but the leadership this with my board of directors and I got to the point where we realized that, we're catching a few people coming off the edge of the table, and meanwhile, there's hordes that are headed our way. So we decided to really focus on a prevention message, and we, really looked at it and said, where's the place that needs it the most? And while, you can say that, kind of back at the 11, 12, 13 would be a logical place. Actually, ground zero in this battle is your college campuses. They are absolutely dying over this, and there's a lot of confusion over sexuality and the whole thing, and yet those are, become our future leaders. So we've partnered with organizations like Campus Crusade. They're putting us on, they're on over 1,000 campuses, and they've committed to 40 campuses for us for the coming year, and said that if we had 8 or 10 of you, speaking out on this issue, that we'd put 8 or 10 of you on 40 campuses a year.
Wow.
And so I said, okay, we'll do that. And so
you're in the
real
process
goal,
of going to campuses and raising up communicators.
Exactly.
The name of the presentation is Porn Nation, and it's a combination of video, interviews, and you speaking. So tell them about how they can get their alma mater.
They can. One thing that we started doing a year ago, which just kind of happened as by the way, but everyone really loves it now. I developed a program called the Alma Mater Sponsorship Program. So if you want to bring God's truth about love, sex, and relationships to your alma mater, or where your kids go to school, or your grandkids, kids, then you can partner with us. And actually, Campus Crusade was so impressed with the program that they've even put up a corporate match.
Wow.
So when we go to these campus directors whose heart is for lost students on campus, we do two things. We go out and speak to lost students. We're averaging about 1,000 students per presentation. 90% of them are into porn, and about 90% of them are non-believers. And we've already had a number of decisions for Christ that come out of that, and we're going to continue that. And then we do a program called Pure Freedom the next night, which is for the Christian students on campus to help them to help define for them a roadmap to personal purity because of the struggle that's going on there.
Wow.
And we want to partner with anyone who wants to help us bring this program to their alma mater. The beauty of that is it's kind of a no-brainer for the larger campuses because they have large staffs with groups like Campus Crusade, but this gives you an opportunity if you came from a small school or a private school to be able to bring us in with a program that normally they wouldn't be able to afford.
Wow.
So.
Thank you for your incredible
You're welcome.
transparency.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Connie.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
The scriptures teach us, and we've talked about this several times, to flee immorality. In our culture, we are encouraged every day to flirt with immorality. But what you've heard today is real simple. The pornography is not a pastime, it is a pathway. It will take you somewhere. And here's the challenge. In light of what's at stake in your life, which may be your current marriage or a future marriage, a current relationship or a future relationship, are you willing to go to whatever extreme measures you need to go to protect that relationship by fleeing from immorality? By asking your question, what does it look like? By asking the question, what does it look like in my life to make no provision for the flesh? How far are you willing to go to protect your most cherished relationships? Because pornography is not a pastime. It is a pathway, and it leads somewhere. Let's pray together. Father,